Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Squared Circle calendar. And on this episode, we're going to be taking a look back at August of 1975, taking a look at some of the goings on in the world of professional wrestling or from around that time. So first off, let's take a look at what was going on with with the NWA World Champions at the time. Of course, these were the NWA World Women's Tag Team Champions, Joyce Grable and Vicky Williams, the World Women's Champion, Fabulous Moolah, um, also the World Junior Heavyweight Champion, um, Hiro Matsuda, as well as the reigning World Heavyweight Champion, Jack Briscoe. Okay, so with that, so first off, the NWA World Women's reigning at the time in August 1975, the NWA reigning World Women's Tag Team Champions were Joyce Grable and Vicky Williams. They, after spending earlier in the year touring Japan and up in Western Canada, they in August they decided to return to the WWWF, the World Wrestling Federation, in which they would engage in series of matches, both singles and as well in tag team against the likes of Donna Christanello and Tony Rhodes, reigniting that feud. They would fend off the challenges of Christanello and Rhodes and at least throughout August would retain the NWA World Women's Tag Team title. We move on now to the World Women's title. Fabulous Moolah would be in the mid-Atlantic area defending the World Women's title against the likes of Sheila Shepherd and Casey and Dottie Downs among others. Also having the occasional matches with some of the others that I mentioned as well. Then as we go to Hiro Matsuda, that's what I needed to do. After spending a good portion of the summer in the tri-state area, Hiro Matsuda would move on into the Texas area, most notably defending the World Junior Heavyweight title against Al Madril, among others. And then for the the reigning NWA World Heavyweight Champion Jack Briscoe, at the beginning of the month, he would make a quick stop in St. Louis to have a defense at the first Friday show in August against the visiting Giant Baba from All Japan, and then would go on a tour. For the first half of August would be down in Florida, where he'd be defending the NWA World Heavyweight title against the likes, of course, of Harley Race, Ciclone Negro, and Rocky Johnson, and then would go the second half of the month into Texas and primarily in the Dallas area, where he would be defending the title against the likes of Fritz Von Erich, Superstar Billy Graham, Al Madril, Jose Lothario, among others. So those were the main world titles, and then I'll be also giving some insight onto what's happened going on around the world. And so now from Japan, from the world of Puroresu in August of 1975. First off, at the beginning of the month, the reigning NWA, the reigning Japanese version, New Japan version of the NWA North American tag team champions, Antonio Inoki and Seiji Sakaguchi, would defend the titles in LA at an NWA Hollywood show against the Hollywood Blondes. Match would end in a no contest, and therefore the titles would then therefore vacated. To have the Hollywood Blondes go over to Japan, to go over to New Japan to participate in the Tokon series, um, going back and forth against Inoki and Sakaguchi. Um, Also on that show, on the Tokon show, among the other gaijins who went over there to participate in that tour would include, of course, the Rougeau brothers from up, or Jacques Rougeau Sr. and his son Ramon, um, from the Montreal, Quebec area, as well as Clayton Thompson representing Joint Promotions England, Mike Sandow representing Europe. Trying to remember who the other guy was. Oh, and Johnny Powers, the reigning NWF North American heavyweight title holder. Um, so that was going on in New Japan, and over in All Japan. Well, okay, so over in All Japan, of course, Giant Baba on the 8th would challenge Jack Briscoe once again for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship in St. Louis, trying to regain the NWA World Championship for a second time. He would lose that match to Briscoe in St. Louis, and then would come back to Japan to participate in the second Summer Action Series of '75, fending off the likes of Johnny Starr and Black Devil. Then, as we move over to the United Kingdom and joint promotions, Steve Logan would successfully capture British the British heavy middleweight title from Burt Royal on the 29th, and then on the following night, on the 30th, on the broadcast, on the World of Sport broadcast, um, they would show a series going on one that's representing Scotland, Britain's world lightweight champion George Kidd and Lee Thomas representing Scotland, and representing England, Blackjack Mulligan, not the same Blackjack Mulligan we know here in the States. This is a different Blackjack Mulligan, and Peter Kay representing England. They would wrestle. They would wrestle in singles matches. Um, they'd wrestle a tag match, and there were two singles matches. One pitting George Kidd um, against Blackjack Mulligan. The other one pitting Lee Thomas against Peter Kay. Team Scotland would win the series. They would sweep the series. In fact, the tag match would have, of course, Kidd and Thomas beating Mulligan and Kay. Kidd beating Mulligan in his singles match, and Thomas beating Kay in his singles match. So Scotland would, in this series, would sweep the series. As we now move on to Canada, we'll take a look. We'll also take a look at the pro wrestling scene there from August 1975. As we head first into the Maritimes provinces, where Bulldog Bob Brown and Leo Burke were continuing their rivalry over the Tate Fist title as well as the North American Heavyweight Championship. As we move ahead to Toronto to Maple Leaf Wrestling, the Kelly Twins and the Crusaders had been feuding throughout the summer months, with the Crusaders finally capturing for the third and final time the Toronto version of the NWA International Tag Team Championships, taking wresting them away from the Kelly twins. They would continue to hold those titles until the titles were officially retired in September of '77. So they basically hold them for the next 2 years after that. As we move ahead, as we move over to Calgary, we head over to Calgary, Stampede Wrestling, um, with with um, with Curtis Ikea preparing to leave the Calgary Alberta Saskatchewan territory, Calgary territory. He would drop the Stampede version of the North American Heavyweight Championship to Larry Lane. Larry Lane would capture the title from him before, as Curtis Ikea was on his way out. Um, then as we head over to Vancouver, British Columbia, on August the 10th, you would have a at a special Sunday show in Vancouver, you would have Gene Knitsky winning the Vancouver version of the Pacific Coast Heavyweight Championship for the fifth time by defeating reigning champion Siegfried Stanky, and then you would have Ricky Hunter and Guy Mitchell dropping the Vancouver version of the Canadian Tag Team Championships to Dale Lewis and Mr. Saito. The same Mr. Saito who would go on to be a two-time WWF World Tag Team Championships. So those are some of the major stories that were happening in Canada in August of 1975. Now, as we head down to the United States and look into pro wrestling scene there, head down first to Puerto Rico, in which first off you had the tag team of Ciclone and Jose Rivera um, winning the Puerto Rican version of the North American tag team titles by beating the reigning champions, the Martels, Pierre and Michel. Um, Also, in the month of August, you'd have a rivalry going on on one side between the Spoilers 1 and 2, and Carlos Colon and Jose Miguel Perez, as um, Colon, the reigning North American heavyweight champion, and Perez, the reigning Puerto Rican champion, were um, fending off the challenges of Spoilers 1 and 2, respectively. Um, Towards the end of the month, on the 25th, Spoiler 1 would eventually capture the NWA North American heavyweight champion from Carlos Colon, and then during a match on the 30th, the Puerto Rican heavyweight title would be held up following a match between reigning champion Jose Miguel Perez and and spoiler number 2. Spoiler number 1, of course, was Don Hardin under a mask. Don Hardin was the man who trained the Undertaker. And spoiler number 2 was under a mask. Was believed to be Big John Studd, John Minton, as I recall, from what I understand. I think that's what it was. Either that or Randy. Actually, it might have been Randy Colley. Randy Colley. But anyways, now from Puerto Rico, we head up to the northeastern United States, where we we talk about the world what we know today as the World Wrestling Entertainment WWE. Back then, it was known as Worldwide Wrestling Federation. It was at the time a part of the NWA. Um, and during this time, during August of '75, you saw Bruno Sammartino being challenged for the WWF Heavyweight Championship from by George Steele. At the time, I don't think he was going by the Animal nickname. He was under the management, I believe, of the Grand Wizard. Um, but he was George Steele was challenging for the WWF Heavyweight title. Also, towards the end of the month, at a WWF Championship Wrestling taping in in Philadelphia on the 26th, the Blackjack Lanza and Mulligan would defeat the reigning champions, um, Irish Pat Barrett and Dominic DeNucci, to win the WWF Tag Team Championships under the guidance of Captain Lou Albano. Um, as we head south down along the Atlantic coast from New York and the northeast section of the country, we head into the Mid-Atlantic and Georgia territories of the NWA. On August the 8th, Ric Flair, who was the reigning television title holder at the time, the Mid-Atlantic TV champion, would drop the title to Paul Jones at a show in Richmond, Virginia, to focus on pursuing the Mid-Atlantic heavyweight title held by Wahoo McDaniel. This would, of course, ignite an on-again, off-again feud between the two that would last for for the next 10 years or so. Um, you know, Also, as we head into Georgia, of course, Dick Slater, Bob Orton Jr. and Dick Slater would continue their dominance in the area in the Macon and Columbus areas of Georgia, to the point to where, after winning the Macon Tag Team Championship, they were forced to vacate the Georgia Tag Team Championships. They would be feuding, of course, with Mr. Wrestling 1 and 2 during the time. You also had Professor Toru Tanaka, and Abdullah Butcher getting into a heated feud, in which at the beginning of the month, of course, Toru Tanaka would beat Abdullah Butcher for the Georgia Heavyweight Championship. Also, Bob Backlund would be feuding Harley Race in a series of matches to determine the number one contender to the NWA World Heavyweight title. He would, of course, get that shot on the 29th at the Omni Show on the 29th against Jack Briscoe. As we would head into Florida, we would see, of course, Jack Briscoe defending in the first half of the month, would be defending the NWA World Heavyweight title against the likes of Ciclone Negro, Rocky Johnson. Also, what we'd see the Negros, Ciclone and Omar, engage in a feud, trading dropping the Florida Tag Team Championships to Jim Dillon, aka JJ Dillon, and Roger Kirby. Also, there was a bit of a rivalry going on between the NWA Florida Heavyweight Champion Bob Roop and the NWA Florida Television Champion Rocky Johnson. They were going back and forth as well. And then when you get over into the Gulf Coast region of Florida, Gulf Coast territory, Ken Lucas was continuing to dominate the area, holding several regional titles, including the Pensacola Panama City, which he would drop on the 21st to the Alaskan Mike York, the Mobile Heavyweight Championship, as well as co-holding the Gulf Coast Tag Team Championship with Nick Kozak, who would subsequently go on to win the Gulf Coast Heavyweight Championship. So we head up from the Gulf Coast area to Tennessee. We noticed that Southeastern Championship Wrestling was starting to establish some of its own titles, including the Brass Knuckles title and the television title. By the end of August, of course, Rock Hunter would be a dominating force in Southeast Championship Wrestling, as he would hold the two singles titles, as well as being co-holder of the Tennessee Tag Title with Assassin, having won a 5-team tournament with the Assassin after the Assassin and his original partner Ron Fuller had split. Then, as we move west of Knoxville into Mid America territory, um, Southern champion Mongolian Stomper would be involved in a rivalry against Magnificent, the NWA Mid America um, champion Magnificent Zulu, fending off his title or fending off his challenge. The Fargos would be the Fargo family, consisting of Don, Jackie, and Roughhouse, would be involved in a feud against the Outlaws and their manager Al Green, um, among other things. Then when we head up to Michigan, you'll see the big feud going on up there was the Sheik versus Mark Lewin. Albeit you also had Bobo Brazil and Tampuro Firpo also involved in all that as well. So as we now head into the central states and tri-state territories, Um, Ed Wiskowski, better known to most fans as Colonel De Beers, would continue his dominance in the Central States territory as he would continue to reign as Central States heavyweight champion through the remainder of the year. Um, as we also go down to St. Louis, um, as I mentioned earlier, you had Giant Baba come in to the show on the 8th to challenge NWA World Heavyweight Champion Jack Briscoe, in which he would lose 2 falls to 1. Briscoe would retain the title 2 falls to 1 over Baba in St. Louis. And then on the next major show in St. Louis, of course, aside from that, the other big feud going on at that time was Harley Race and Rocky Johnson coming up from Florida to engage in a feud over the NWA Missouri State Heavyweight Championship. Of course, at this time down in Florida, Rocky Johnson was the reigning television title holder. He would come up to St. Louis to try to wrest the Missouri State Heavyweight Championship away from Harley Race. And as you get down into tri-state area, you still had a dispute going on over the North American Heavyweight Championship, as you'd have two men who were laying claim to it at the time. How this all came about was about 2.5 years prior to this, back in late '72. Bill Watts, while the reigning tri-state North American Heavyweight champion, would leave the area. And defend the title in Florida and Georgia, in which his title became known as the Georgia-Florida version of the North American Heavyweight Championship. After he left, they crowned a new champion. And initially, it was Tang Patton, the champion. Of course, the championship had gone past with several hands by this point in time. It was Dick Murdoch, who was the tri-state North American Heavyweight Champion. So these two men, and Killer Carl Cox was also in the mix of that. The three of them were basically eventually by the end of the year, the two titles would be merged back into one, and it would be officially become the tri-state North American title undisputed um, by the end of the year. Now, as we head over to the Lone Star State to check out what was going on there, in the eastern half of Texas, you had, you did have both the NWA World Heavyweight and World Junior Heavyweight champions coming through, in which Jack Briscoe, the World Heavyweight champion, would be defending his title against Al Madrill and Billy Graham, and then Al Madrill would also contend for the World Junior Heavyweight title. Of course, Al Madrill was one of the more dominant figures at this time in the East Texas territory. He was both the reigning Texas Heavyweight and Texas Tag Team Champion. He was, of course, the reigning Texas Tag Team Champion with his tag partner Jose Lothario, Super Sock, the guy known for training Shawn Michaels. Um, also, at this time, Billy Graham was getting a bit of a main event push. Aside from, of course, challenging for the the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, he also would recapture the East Texas version of the Brass Knuckles title from Mad Dog Vachon. He would also face off during the month of August in in I believe it was Dallas or Fort Worth against Andre the Giant on a stopover on a brief tour away from the WWF. Over in West Texas, the big rivalry going on was between the crippler Ray Stevens and the Lawmen, as he was splitting time between the AWA and Western States. During his time in Western States, Ray Stevens was competing for the West Texas version of the Brass Knuckles title. So he would defeat Johnny Starr for it, and then would basically would go into a feud with Lawman over it, in which Lawman would win the title for the third time from him, and then Ray Stevens would win it back for his third reign. So now, as we head out to the NWA territories of the West Coast, some of the big things going on out there, wrestling wise, included the rivalry between Hollywood Blondes and Black Gordman and Goliath coming to an end when Black Gordman and Goliath would defeat Hollywood Blondes for the America's Tag Team Championship. Um, this would mark, of course, the out that the Blondes needed to go and partake in the Japanese tour, where they would go on to, after the their attempt on the first to win the North American Tag Team Championships at the New Japan Hollywood version of those titles, ended in a no contest, with titles being vacated. Um, Also going on, in of course, up in Northern California, there was back and forth between the Invaders and Pat Patterson and Moondog Mayne over the San Francisco version of the World Tag Team Championships. Uh, Mayne and Patterson would defeat the Invaders on the 9th, only to drop the titles back to the Invaders on the 23rd. Um, let's see, and also on the 9th, Jimmy Snuka would win the NWA Pacific Northwest Heavyweight Championship from defeating Bull Ramos long before he became the Superfly. So, um, as we head back to the Midwest part of the country, we head to Chicago on the 16th, I believe. Let me double check that. Yes, on the 16th, um, at the AWA show in Chicago, Nick Bockwinkel and Ray Stevens would drop the title to Dick the Bruiser and Crusher. Um, as this was a way for Ray Stevens to leave the territory to go wrestle in other territories like Western states, and for Nick Bockwinkel to focus on pursuing um, Vern Gagne for the AWA World Heavyweight Championship, which he would win towards the end of the year, end of 1975, and start a 5-year run. So, um, so on the 16th at the Chicago Amphitheater in the at the AWA show, Dick the Bruiser and Crusher would defeat the team known in some territories as the Blonde Bombers of Nick Bockwinkel and Ray Stevens for the AWA World Tag Team Championships. So that's all of what was going on in August of 1975 in the world of professional wrestling. If you'd like to contact me directly, my Discord link is in the links below. You can also comment on my community board. I will usually get back to you as soon as I can. And if you like this content, please consider liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing. I always look forward to the conversation with you guys, as long as it's civil and respectful. Don't forget, okay, now, guys, you know that I'm live streaming. So you can always catch me every, Monday through Friday night, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. 8 p.m. Mountain, 9 Central. I think it's 3 a.m. in the United Kingdom. I think it might be 11 o'clock in the morning the following morning, Tuesday, 11 o'clock or 3 a.m. in the morning, Tuesday through Saturday, 11 a.m. in, I believe it would be 11 a.m. in, Japan, Tuesday through Saturday, and I think 12 noon in Australia, um, Tuesday through Saturday. So until next time, I'll see you guys later. Bye.